The trumpet's final note was still echoing through the Phoenix Outdoor Theater when Mateo hit the ground like a dropped marionette, his body betraying him at the worst possible moment in front of 3,000 festival goers who'd been expecting entertainment, not a medical emergency. 12 hours earlier, he and 3 friends from El Salvador had successfully hidden beneath the risers and equipment of a touring marching band, crossing the border as part of a cultural exchange that no one suspected was smuggling 4 desperate young men toward American dreams. But as Mateo's unconscious form lay center stage while paramedics rushed toward him, his collapse was becoming the viral video that would turn their anonymous border crossing into a nationwide manhunt. The spotlights that had been designed to illuminate the band's performance now served as interrogation lights, revealing not just Mateo's dehydrated and exhausted body, but the 3 friends who'd been hiding beneath the stage platform, their carefully planned invisibility destroyed by one moment of physical failure. Within minutes, what should have been their triumphant arrival in America had become a social media phenomenon, with thousands of phones recording their exposure and federal agents already reviewing footage that would soon make them the most recognizable undocumented immigrants in the country. 3 weeks earlier, the plan had seemed like divine inspiration when they learned about the Southwest Cultural Exchange Festival, an annual event that brought Mexican and American musical groups together for cross-border performances. Eduardo, who'd been working construction near the Tijuana venue, had noticed how the American marching band transported their equipment in massive trailers that crossed the border with minimal inspection. Cultural exchanges enjoyed special diplomatic courtesy, making them perfect cover for creative smuggling operations. The 4 friends, Mateo, Eduardo, Carlos, and Gabriel, had grown up together in San Salvador, surviving the gang violence that had claimed too many of their childhood friends and the economic collapse that had made legitimate success impossible. At 22, 23, 21, and 24 respectively, they represented El Salvador's lost generation, educated enough to understand their country's limitations, young enough to believe America offered unlimited possibilities, desperate enough to risk everything for a chance at both. Eduardo's construction work had provided the intelligence they needed about the festival's logistics. The American band, Los Angeles Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, traveled with elaborate staging equipment that created natural hiding spaces beneath their portable risers. The group's reputation for community service and cultural outreach made them unlikely targets for suspicious border inspections. Most importantly, their performance schedule would take them directly to Phoenix, where the friends had contacts in the Latino community. The preparation had been meticulous, with Eduardo mapping the band's equipment truck during their Tijuana performances. The hiding space beneath the stage platform was cramped but adequate for 4 people, with air gaps that would provide ventilation during the border crossing. The band's practice schedule gave them a window of opportunity during equipment loading when they could slip into position without being detected by the musicians or crew. Gaining access to the hiding space required timing and luck in equal measure. The night before departure, while the band members attended a farewell dinner and the crew conducted final equipment checks, the 4 friends slipped into the storage area where the stage platforms were kept. Eduardo's construction experience proved invaluable in understanding how to position themselves among the equipment without interfering with the setup process. The space beneath the stage platform was designed for equipment storage, not human transportation, but it offered just enough room for 4 determined young men to survive a border crossing. They brought minimal supplies, water bottles, energy bars, and a small flashlight, calculating that the journey would last no more than 6 hours from departure to arrival at the Phoenix venue. The border crossing itself passed without incident, exactly as they'd hoped. Customs agents at the port entry examined the cultural exchange documentation, briefly inspected the equipment truck, and processed the group through with the respect accorded to legitimate cultural ambassadors. The friends remained hidden beneath the staging equipment, while uniformed officers walked past their hiding space, separated from discovery by inches and the assumption that musical groups carried instruments rather than immigrants. For 8 hours, everything proceeded according to plan. The truck maintained highway speeds toward Phoenix, while the 4 friends endured cramped conditions that seemed like a small price to pay for successful border crossing. They whispered occasionally about their plans once they reached Phoenix, sharing dreams of construction work that paid real wages and family reunification that had been impossible from El Salvador. But the Arizona heat was more brutal than they'd anticipated. and the equipment truck's insulation that protected musical instruments also trapped heat around their hiding space. By the time they reached Phoenix, all four were suffering from dehydration and heat exhaustion that made them weak and disoriented. Mateo, who'd been fighting diabetes since his teens, was in particularly bad condition. His blood sugar dangerously low after hours without proper nutrition. The setup process at the Phoenix venue required them to remain hidden while crew members assembled the stage equipment around them. For 2 more hours, they listened to sounds of preparation, equipment being tested, microphones being checked, audience members beginning to arrive, while their physical condition continued to deteriorate in confined space beneath the platform. When the performance finally began, the music above them was deafening, but it also provided cover for their planned escape. During the band's first song, they were supposed to slip out from beneath the platform and disappear into the audience, becoming just 4 more Latino faces in a crowd that would include hundreds of festival attendees. The plan allowed for every contingency except physical collapse. Mateo's diabetes had been manageable in El Salvador with proper diet and medication, but the stress and deprivation of the border crossing had thrown his blood sugar into dangerous territory. As the band played their opening number, he began showing signs of diabetic crisis, confusion, weakness, and loss of consciousness that made quiet escape impossible. Eduardo, Carlos, and Gabriel tried to help him, but their options were limited by the need to remain hidden and the confined space of their hiding spot. They had glucose tablets, but Mateo was beyond being able to swallow medication. His condition was deteriorating rapidly, and they faced a horrible choice between letting him die quietly or revealing their presence by seeking help. The decision was made for them when Mateo began having seizures that couldn't be controlled in their cramped hiding space. During a quiet passage in the band performance, his involuntary movements created enough noise to attract attention from crew members who began investigating sounds that shouldn't have been coming from beneath the stage. When Mateo was discovered unconscious and in obvious medical distress, the crew's immediate response was humanitarian rather than punitive. They pulled him from a hiding space and onto the stage, calling for paramedics while trying to revive him. Only after his 3 friends followed him onto the platform did the full situation become clear to the band members and venue security. The performance stopped abruptly as paramedics worked on Mateo in front of an audience that had come for entertainment but was witnessing a medical emergency that would soon become an immigration incident. The festival's live stream was broadcasting to thousands of viewers online, turning a local cultural event into national news as social media users began sharing footage of the dramatic rescue. Mateo's collapse had been captured by professional cameras recording the festival for promotional use, but it was the cell phone videos from audience members that went viral within hours. The image of a young man in obvious distress being pulled from beneath a stage became a powerful symbol that different viewers interpreted in radically different ways, either as evidence of immigration desperation or as proof of criminal behavior that threatened cultural events. Gabriel, Carlos, and Eduardo managed to escape during confusion surrounding Mateo's medical emergency, slipping away from the venue while attention focused on the paramedics working on their friend. But their faces had been captured in dozens of videos, and social media users were already identifying them as accomplices in what news outlets were describing as an elaborate immigration fraud scheme. The hospital where Mateo was treated became the center of media attention as his condition stabilized, but his legal situation became increasingly complex. Immigration authorities detained him immediately, but his medical needs required continued hospitalization under federal supervision. His diabetes management became intertwined with deportation proceedings that attracted advocacy groups and immigration hardliners in equal measure. The viral video of his collapse generated millions of views and thousands of comments that turned Mateo into a symbol for broader immigration debates. Some viewers saw a young man so desperate for American opportunities that he'd risk death for the chance at a better life. Others saw a criminal who'd exploited cultural exchange programs and endangered public safety through illegal border crossing. Gabriel, Carlos, and Eduardo had scattered across Phoenix, but their faces were already circulating on social media platforms where users were crowdsourcing their identification and location. The immigration advocacy groups trying to help them were competing with vigilante networks determined to report them to federal authorities. Their successful border crossing had been overshadowed by their unwitting transformation into public figures. The FBI investigation that followed was extensive, examining not just the four friends but the cultural exchange program that had unwittingly facilitated their crossing. The Los Angeles Metropolitan Youth Orchestra faced scrutiny about their security procedures and whether they had been negligent in allowing their equipment to be used for human smuggling. The cultural exchange itself was suspended pending investigation. The band members, mostly teenagers and young adults who joined the orchestra for artistic rather than political reasons, found themselves thrust into immigration debates they'd never engaged with before. Some expressed sympathy for the four friends, understanding that desperation drove people to dangerous extremes. Others felt their cultural mission had been exploited by people who turned their art into criminal conspiracy. Eduardo's construction experience, which had enabled their border crossing, became crucial for survival in Phoenix's underground economy. But his recognizable face from a viral video made employment dangerous, as employers feared association with the nationally known immigration fugitives. The skills that had gotten them to America became liabilities that made staying there nearly impossible. Carlos and Gabriel found shelter in the Latino community, but their celebrity status made them targets for both sympathizers and opponents of immigration reform. Some community members wanted to help the young man, who became symbols of immigrant desperation. Others wanted them to leave before their presence brought federal attention to the entire neighborhood. The festival where their crossing had been exposed became an annual reminder of their story, with subsequent events featuring enhanced security designed to prevent similar incidents. The cultural exchange program implemented new procedures for equipment transport and venue security, treating artistic collaboration as potential cover for criminal activity. Mateo's deportation, when it finally came, was covered by news outlets that had followed his story from viral video to federal prosecution. His diabetes was now well controlled with American medical care, but he was being returned to El Salvador with criminal charges that would prevent future legal immigration attempts. The life-saving medical attention he'd received in Phoenix was offset by the legal consequences of how he'd arrived there. The three friends who'd escaped faced a different kind of punishment. They were alive and in America, but as nationally recognized fugitives whose faces were associated with immigration fraud. Their success had been poisoned by visibility that made anonymous integration impossible. They'd achieved their goal of crossing the border, but their achievement had been documented and distributed to millions of viewers. Years later, Eduardo still worked construction in Phoenix, but under an assumed identity that required constant vigilance and false documentation. His face had changed enough with age and weight loss that recognition was rare. But the viral video remained online, a permanent record of the moment when his careful planning had been undone by his friend's medical emergency. Carlos had moved to Los Angeles, finding work in restaurants where his story was occasionally recognized by customers who remembered the viral video. Most treated him with curiosity rather than hostility, but the constant possibility of recognition made every interaction stressful. He'd achieved his dream of reaching America, but at the cost of ever feeling truly safe there. Gabriel had been deported after being recognized at a traffic stop 2 years after the festival incident. The video had given him celebrity that made anonymity impossible, and eventually that celebrity had led to his capture. He'd returned to El Salvador with experience of American life that made his home country feel even more hopeless than before. The marching band continued performing at cultural festivals, but their equipment trucks now included security measures designed to prevent human smuggling. The artistic exchange that had provided cover for Friends Crossing had been tainted by association with immigration fraud, requiring new procedures that treated every piece of equipment as potential contraband. The stage platform beneath which they'd hidden was eventually replaced with new equipment that eliminated the hiding spaces that had made their crossing possible. The cultural exchange program survived the scandal, but with enhanced security that made similar exploitation unlikely. Their success had closed the door for others who might have attempted similar crossings. The viral video that had exposed their presence remained popular on social media platforms, generating new comments and shares years after the original incident. Mateo's collapse continued to be interpreted as either tragedy or justice, depending on the viewer's perspective on immigration policy. Their moment of vulnerability had become permanent entertainment for audiences who'd never faced similar choices. The festival where their story had been exposed added a new element to subsequent events. Immigration discussions that acknowledged how cultural exchange could intersect with border enforcement. The artistic celebration that had unwittingly facilitated their crossing became a forum for debates about immigration policy that none of the original participants had intended to spark. The trumpet's final note that had preceded Mateo's collapse was eventually recognized as the end of more than just a musical performance. It had marked the conclusion of their anonymous status and the beginning of their transformation into public figures whose border crossing story would be debated and analyzed long after they dispersed into American shadows or been returned to the Salvadoran poverty they'd risked everything to escape. Their success at crossing the border had been documented and distributed to millions of viewers, making them simultaneously successful and captured, free and fugitive, anonymous and famous. The stage that had hidden them during their crossing had ultimately exposed them to scrutiny they'd never anticipated, turning their private desperation into public spectacle that would define their lives long after music stopped playing.